Hello, welcome to another episode of our podcast. And today it's going to be really, really technical because I'm joined by my longtime online friend, Tristan. So maybe, Tristan, you can. Do you actually remember when we met? Because I remember faintly that some guy was texting me on IRC about some networking stuff.
Mm. Okay, so I think there were many German people involved. I think I somehow, okay, I know what the first thing that we did together was, but I can't actually remember how we got in contact. But I think you must have been on my IRC server. I think that must have been the starting point, something like that. But I
Yeah,
don't know how you got there.
same. I don't remember either. I only remember like, oh yeah, Tristan, we met on IRC, but I
Mm-hmm.
cannot really. I'm not even sure what IRC it was. Maybe it was Hackend, and maybe it was related to
Yeah,
some
wait.
networking.
Actually, I know. You know what it was? It was Hackend. I think I think I might have been doing some, because obviously in Germany you guys got Freifunk and all of that stuff. And I
Yeah,
think I was asking something about Batman Advanced, like the layer two routing protocol. Yeah, I think that's where I met you though. I met you. I didn't meet you yet in real life. We
yes,
still have
yes,
to
yes.
organize that.
Awesome. Yeah, this is interesting that you mentioned Freifunk.
Mm,
Like my like the how's it called, high time of Freifunk, where I was
mm.
really active. I think that was 2015, 2016, or 2017, around this. So it's almost 10 years ago that we actually met online.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite funny because I don't know, yeah, it was during also the time where I was really hyper focused on anything networking. Because just to
Mm.
give you context, how that happened, it was I was working back then. We had like a software as a service company where we built a marketplace to trade domain names. There are a few already on the market, and we thought
Mm.
like, oh, we're gonna be better than them. uh,
Yes, yes. Famous
the
last words.
usual famous last words. We were we were technically quite cool, quite well
Mm.
as well. Like we had some really nice product ideas and whatnot, and I was really nerding out on many different things. And but
I actually
we
do
weren't.
remember that. I remember you doing the domain stuff. I do remember something like that. And then at the same time, you must have been, you did that. And I think at the same time, I remember you showing you, I don't know if you were learning some new programming language or you did something in C and you said it was like some game I could play online. I remember those two. Okay, it's very vague, but I mean, it happened at the same time.
There are a few things like that. Like
Yes.
I had some games,
And you
and
got
back in
the Quake that you have now, or is it Doom? Is it Doom or it's
yeah,
Quake? It's
yeah,
Quake,
quick,
yeah.
quick, quick. This is quite recent actually.
Yeah, yeah.
I started like a year ago, a year and a month.
Mm-hmm.
We got bored during the holidays, and I was like, I want to tinker around with something. But yeah, back then I was really deep into networking and some low level stuff because
Mm-hmm.
we built this platform, and I was building together with like a guy from Poland. We were building like this web front end to everything, and I was doing the back end stuff. And we
Mm-hmm.
were having challenges like, okay, we want to host like conveniently many websites, many domains, like those small little landing pages with some text on
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
a
those little
contact
things,
form.
yeah.
So these things, and I was like, usually you take your domain, you configure like a name server, and that's it, as like someone who's using the platform. And then I was like, name server. I need to come up with like something which is like returning always the same records for no matter what
Mm-hmm.
domains you configure, and then you let the web application figure out what domain has been requested. And I remember I went down deep down the rabbit hole, like, oh, what is DNS? How is it working? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
back then I knew, but I didn't know about Anycast. I didn't know about like
Oh, yeah,
how
all of
to
those things, yeah.
distribute like the load
But
geographically, like
speaking on
independently.
DNS though, so you learned that back then, and that was like multiple years ago. And I think,
Hmm.
I mean, the domain name for my website, for example, I mean, the DNS in terms of the one TLD above is run by
Yeah,
you. So I kind of
yeah,
learned, a few years later, I'm learning the stuff you learned. So it's and it's not just that, the IPv6 stuff. You had done that way before I'd gotten into it, and you helped me get into it. I mean, you were my ISP for the longest time,
yeah.
basically.
True. Oh, that was so interesting because I got so hyper focused. Like, I had this nerd curiosity on like, oh, I want to set up like this Anycast network. I want to set up like some hosting stuff. And back then we were with a
Mm.
couple of different hosting companies, and some of
Yes, I
them
remember. Yeah.
we had
There
to
was
move
that. Who was
around.
that? You had one for that did like some VXLAN stuff, but they had like they had like a crocodile, I think, as their logo. But they had some problem once, where they were duplicating every single packet, and I was being bombarded. Like everything that came into me, it got duplicated. It was some provider you had, and you switched away from it quickly. But I just
Oh,
remember it
yeah, yeah, yeah.
caused some problems.
Did I don't remember the logo and what name it was, but I remember there was some. They had some internal networking
Yeah,
stuff, and I think in retrospect they configured one of the switches wrong, where it
must have
started
been. Yeah.
flooding on all ports. Because I've seen this again in one customer project back then, where um, I can go into this rabbit hole as well. This was like the next step. Like, first I was figuring everything out, and then at some point people were like, "Oh, there's this guy who does all the data center shit for some reason," and then
Mm-mm.
they started approaching me, and I was like, "Data center? I have no clue, but yeah, you know more than the others. Just figure it out." Okay, so yeah, that's why I remember I was late night one night debugging some stuff with like duplicate packets, and I was
Mm.
like, where is it coming from? And at some point I realized, oh no, the bonding. It is set to round robin, where it's like distributing here and there the
Yeah, it goes
packets,
between each of them. Yeah, yeah.
and it started like on the adjacent switches, like starting to flood from all ports, and it came back twice, and it was so hard to pinpoint because every time I was like, well, why is there sometimes a duplicate packet, like a ping back?
Mm-hmm.
You see this duplicate
A dupe.
going up,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, why? And yeah, it must have been something like that. My ISP back then, they were playing around with some stuff, and they back then they I was with an ISP, and actually they were not a data center provider. They were like
Mm-hmm.
using the co-location facilities, and
I do
they were
recall
setting up
that. You
like,
told me a story of when you actually carried a server from one place to another. I remember something vague like that. Yeah.
yes, that was with them. And it was so funny because they started small. I think they bought like some servers, or like the
Mm.
IP, not IP address, but the intellectual property of
Yeah.
another hosting company, which went bankrupt. So they started, and then they tried to learn as they went, and they
Learning
started
in production. Yeah.
learning in production. Where I was also sometimes like, guys, I'm using this as my production environment. You cannot
Yeah.
tell me that you have like a single point of failure in this particular setup. This is absolutely
Wild. Yeah.
no way. So I remember that was quite fun.
Mm.
But they grew as they went, because they were growing, and they were upgrading and upgrading. And at some point I was so happy. I was like, oh, finally they got some proper switches. Oh, finally
Mm.
they got some
There
proper
was one thing
router.
I wanted to mention. I just want to quickly go grab it. It's on my shelf. But speaking about when you were my ISP, because that's what you were. You were basically
Yeah.
my real ISP. I just want to grab this so I can show this to you. So I used to do a lot of my first actual router that I used. I was running WireGuard. I had it connected to you, and then, you enable the forwarding, all of that stuff. But I was running it on like a big ATX like machine, like one of the normal like computer tower.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, basically, it became a little bit problematic because I would have times where that machine would just turn off. It also had another problem where it wasn't properly grounded. So if you touch the underneath of it, you'd get a shock continuously. Um, and so my brother fixed it because it was on a metal shelf. So what he did is he's like, well, just connect it to something that's a huge metal object and you won't get shocked because we'll choose that as that will be the path of least resistance then. They just took a little bit
Yeah.
of a wire, put it around, and now it was grounded into my shelf. So I'm like, okay, that's dangerous, but that's all right. Um, so I changed from that, and I used to get a lot of equipment from my actual ISP, the V4 Legacy ISP. You're the real ISP. And I started off with MikroTik, and on RouterOS version 7, they introduced WireGuard, and I was actually using one of these over here. So That's a
Awesome.
RB433, I believe. Um, and it's got a few things. It's got like, so that I'd use as the uplink, and then I would split two subnets between these two ports over here. And this was just planked on the side of my desk like that, and it would just run over there the whole time. But it wasn't that reliable. It would turn on and off now and then. So I'd be at university trying to access stuff at home. I'd be like, Mom, and my mom became a professional at this. She was my debugger when I wasn't there. I'm like, Mom, please go restart the router. Which one? Okay. The one in my room? What thing? The barrel jack. Can you just unplug it and put it back in? And I'm like, okay, what lights do you see appearing on it? So I had a lot of fun with this sort of stuff. And yeah, it's nice turning junk into something that actually works, you know? So
Oh
it was a
yeah.
fun thing for me to do.
That brings me actually back to the whole Freifunk shenanigans what we
Mm.
did, because you Freifunk is just like a community, and they wanted to build open Wi-Fi's and radio links and bring
Yeah, yeah.
basically internet to places where there was no proper internet connectivity. And we were so reliant on like people donating their trash, more or less, like giving us like, I remember we had this one setup in kind of like a closet, like usually like where there's some brooms and whatnot, and some toilet paper
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
stashed.
yeah.
And I remember someone was approaching us on some event, was like, "Yeah, I'm working for this party venue," and the facility manager, he was talking about this closet, and they were mentioning at some point there's a fiber connection and it goes to the NIX, the Nuremberg Internet Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like asking back Freifunk, like, "Do you know how to get internet on this? Because it says internet exchange. This is like you would go to like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
ISP and get like a modem, and then boom, you're online." And they were like, "It's different, but we should be able to help." And then it turns out it was actually really a fiber connection going to a data center close by, and
And
it
this
was
was
going
just in a
there.
closet. This was just in a
And this,
closet.
yeah, because this was a larger venue. It used to be some, I don't know, I'm not sure if it was a factory or a warehouse or
Okay,
something.
or something like that, yeah.
So there was something larger, and it turned into like this party event venue. And that at least someone was like, "Hey, there's this connection." And we were mind blown. We were like, "How's this possible?" And then we
But
were
that's
asking,
interesting that
like,
you say that it actually did connect up to an internet exchange. Like that is
"Yeah,
wild that it, like normally if you go into somebody's house, you like got a fiber connection, yeah, but it's like for a customer. That is such a weird thing to just leave dangling. I mean, I love it. Like that's like, it's great. You don't have to lay any new fiber. It's just like connect me up. So
yeah,
that's
yeah."
interesting. Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure about the details, like what really
Mm.
happened. That there was this dark fiber connecting to the next best data center, and they had it actually documented. So we still were like, okay, let's figure it out. So I think we reached out to the company behind the NIX. It's actually, I think, one of the data center companies is actually running this. It's spread across the whole city in Nuremberg. There are a couple of data centers, like Hetzner is one of them. There are a
Mm.
few others. They are all connected, like this ring connection. It's actually underneath a street, a ring road in a city. What
Okay.
I've been told. I've never seen the plans, but this is how the legend goes. And so we were reaching out, like, "Do you know if to this venue there is a dark fiber?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah. We connected them when we were laying those fibers, and in fact, this venue is on this ring road." And so we're like,
Oh, okay.
"Okay, so cool." And then we actually, yeah, you could connect it, and you would get a signal back. So it was definitely patched through. And then it started like, okay, who can give us actually upstream? Because going to an internet
Mm.
exchange, I think for those who are unfamiliar with it, you cannot go there, plug it in, and it's more like a LAN party, and you can go live. You need to have someone who is actually your ISP. So we were then reaching out to, like, there was a small member list on the website of the NIX. We're like, "Here we are, this nonprofit. Would it be possible if you can give us some upstream?" And then usually you're like, we will see. And then at some point when they remember or they are doing something, because usually it's the best when they're already active in some area, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we need to install something or configure something, then they're like, oh, I know we can do this request for free on top. And they were like, yeah, we can do this, but how much traffic are we
Yeah, the
gonna
big
have to
question.
expect from you? And then usually like, oh, not more than 100 megabits. We will see, because Freifunk was also doing a lot of just like VPN exit, more or less. So there's
Yeah,
lots
that's
of
what
people
that's
like,
what I remember it doing. I remember they had that whole thing set up. So also, it wasn't to like skirt around German law or something to do. There was something about
yes,
public Wi-Fi access points, something like that.
yes. Germany, super backwards. I think they changed it a few years ago, but back
Mm,
then it was like, if you share your internet connection, you can get held liable for whatever they are
for
doing.
somebody else that does something on it. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So that's why a lot of people were like, okay, we need to have this VPN exit, and then this VPN exit is actually operated by a legal entity which is officially registered like as an ISP, and then
Mm,
usually you can work your way around, and then you're like, yeah, we are offering for free, so we do not have to collect data, and since we do not have to collect data, we cannot tell you who's behind
who's
each
doing what?
connection.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we had this exit set up. And then yeah, this requires some traffic, because back then we had some like volunteers setting up VPN gateways. I was with my company, also one of them, because I was like, I can set up my company as one of these legal entities. I can register
Yeah.
as an ISP, and then if the police is coming, it's going to be more fun for us to figure out how to solve it. so I was one of the exit providers, and nothing ever happened.
Mm,
We caused some traffic, but that's it. But we got a lot of abuse messages, I remember, because people were doing stupid stuff with it.
mm.
So from port scans to someone ordered like with a fake identity bus tickets, which happened
Oh
where I
no, the
got the
biggest
email.
crime ever, the hugest crime ever.
Yeah, I mean, probably they did it systematically, because at some point, like
Oh
I think
yeah, like botted or
federal
something. Yeah.
federal police was reaching out to us like, hey, I guess you are not really the person we are looking for, but maybe you can help us. And then I
Mm,
explained to them like, hey, no, this is how this all of this shebang works. And then they were really helpful to get like a free IT lesson.
yeah.
But
No, of course, of
yeah,
course.
was quite interesting back then. But yeah, going back to the story, so we were actually reaching out. I think I wasn't involved myself. The others, they were actually asking for who can actually provide some uplink, and then this everything came about. And then someone from our community was like, okay, we need to get like a small computer we can stuff in this closet and have like an uplink, like a 10 gig NIC to get it going. And yeah, and then suddenly you start learning that you cannot really build your own router, especially if you're routing many small packets.
Mm,
Because we had all the fun with like IRQ overflows. We there were too many
mm.
packets simply being dropped because the CPU couldn't handle it anymore. And we were so grateful when someone was like, "Oh, I can donate you a MikroTik 10G cloud switch, cloud router, one of these thingies." And we were like,
Mm.
"An actual router? And it speaks BGP, and we can actually connect things to it, like one of the big guys." And we set this up, and suddenly we could like really saturate the link. We got the 10G link, and we were then pushing, and I remember like seeing like, oh, we are now doing like 8 gigabits, 9 gigabits. And then we were asking our upstream provider like, are you okay with that? Because we are saturating the link. And they gave us like an unofficial off the record reply, something like, yeah, we pay for this. And so finally someone is actually
Finally,
utilizing the
somebody's using it.
connection.
Yeah. But going back to the Firefunk stuff in the beginning, I think it must have been Hackint where I met you, and I think I was specifically because at the time I was very new to networking. I mean, I looked at the mesh networking stuff back in my last year or second last year of school. And this was before I
Mhm.
didn't even know what a subnet was. I didn't even know what a prefix was. I didn't know anything about routing, but I was trying to get into this stuff. And I had bought a bunch of, because back then they had like, I think they had the firmware called Gluon, It was that custom firmware you could build
Yeah.
for your own Frifrunk community. So like Frifrunk,
Yep.
wherever you want to do it, set the protocol you want to use. You want to use Babel, OLSR, whatever the theme, all of that stuff. The VPN, but for the upstream stuff as well. And I was looking into that, and I think I had a few questions here and there. It was a pretty good project, I must say. It worked like out of the box to build a firmware. And I had bought some TP links because that was quite the popular thing. That was back then when OpenWRT could still fit on like an off-the-shelf cheap TP link. Nowadays,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
can't.
I remember.
And yeah, I started getting into that, and I had 2 nodes in my room, and I played Minecraft across it with one of my friends. So I got to test it out, but it wasn't much. And I think from there I started looking into other things. I don't know if you recall that project CJDNS. It was that end-to-end
I heard of
encrypted.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was one of the before like Yggdrasil and all that stuff. Like it was one of the original sort of where your IP address is derived from a hash of your public key. One of those sort of cryptographically routed. I think it's CRAs or cryptographic addresses is a terminology for it, but so I started getting into that, and that was nice because you could then peer over the internet and peer locally. So I was running a few services and stuff and seeing what other people were running. I remember at the time there was a guy running something called, so the network was called Hyperborea. That's what they called it. Don't ask me why. It's kind of
Never
an odd
heard of
choice
it.
of a name, but yeah, so they chose that. And there was a guy that ran a service on there called the Hyperborea Information Agency, kind of like after the CIA. He had the HIA. And what it would do is it would learn, I think, based on announcements of different routers. It would kind of figure it out. And then would do a port, it must have done like an aggressive port scan on every single host. And they built up this huge database of things that are accessible on CJDNS. And most of the stuff was mundane. Some people had CCTV cameras on there. A lot of HP printers. That was also an interesting thing that people had done. So yeah, it was very. There was a lot of, that sort of like real cool hacker sort of projects where it's like this nice little niche community building. It was really something special like that.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. It felt like your own little internet. It didn't have a million advertisements. It wasn't cringe. It was quite cool. So that was my
Yes.
beginning introduction to mesh networking, and then from there started learning networking proper. And then I eventually met you, and we did a bunch of stuff together. So I think that's where it began.
Yeah, I remember like we were talking about IPv6 and you were complaining like, yeah, none of my ISPs is actually able
No,
to
nobody did it. Yeah.
to provide it. Well, probably, I don't know, how's the situation right now? Is it getting better?
So the ISP I'm with, I could message them. They probably don't have it, but there was another ISP that I messaged. There's only 2 in our town. We haven't moved off the one we're on because they're quite good family friends, and they're the ones that let me go dumpster dive in their stuff. So,
Nice.
it's kind of like a quid pro quo. I'm not going to go leave them and be like, yo, can I still take your rubbish off of your hands, So, but
Yeah.
they've been pretty good. But I don't think I think you'd have to have like a business connection. And even then, it's a real oddity in South Africa to have an IPv6 to the home, like as a
Yeah.
default.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing here. So it's odd.
That's
I don't know
crazy.
why, but
Yeah, probably also like some legacy setups because I remember like in Germany, in one of the cities, I was actually having a client there and they also upgraded their shitty DSL connection for the whole office. And it was a design company, like they were designing actual products. So they were moving around terabytes of data and they were complaining like, it takes ages to upload this file. And we have this manufacturer in China and they're waiting and they're laughing like, why is uploading stuff so slow? And it took me ages to figure out like that was quite interesting. They were sitting in not like an office building, but like a residential building. But they were occupying the first floor. And I remember talking to the landlord, and the landlord was like, there's this ISP, the local one. They told me that we got this fiber connection. So talk to them. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And then I went to the ISP. I was like, hey, this is the street. This is the address. They were like, no, well, we don't have a fiber connection there. I'm like, oh, is is the landlord like I don't know, shitting me? What is going on? I went back to the landlord. I was like, sorry, they claim there is no connection, and then he
yeah,
got really
apparently
angry
not.
and
The
mad.
fiber doesn't exist.
And then he was like, come with me. We go to the basement. And then he showed me like there was like this box, there was like actual fiber, and there was like the logo of the ISP on it. And then he showed me also like a folder with like all the documentation, like, here, take this, call them again. There's a fiber connection. I'm like, yes, sir. Will do. And then I called again. I was like, I got your name on this document. I got a project ID. And the guy on the phone was like, project ID? Oh, does it start with an one? I was like, yes. Yeah, this is in the old system. Let me check again. I was like, oh, what the hell? And then he was like on mute for like 2-3 minutes. And I was like, oh, yeah. I saw it in the old system. It's all set up. We can provide you like a fiber internet connection. We have everything set up. It's up to a gigabit. More we cannot do right now, but it should be upgradable in the future. I was like, hallelujah. So we are having progress here. So we set this up, everything worked, and I was also talking to them like, okay, what about IPv6? And they were like, yeah, tricky because we cannot really do the traffic accounting. So we are working on IPv6, but many of our systems just
I
they
would like to
can't
say that
really.
that's the famous last words is we're working on implementing IPv6. I mean, that's like
Mhm.
visiting github.com. Apparently they're working on it, but like it doesn't work. Like I don't get it. At one stage, I swear this is what I had to do just to get GitHub working. This was before I did NAT64, which is what I do now.
Yep.
DNS64 works really good. Um, this was so stupid. I ran I2P, you know, the Invisible Internet Project, the like Tor alternative. And I
Yep.
had one of the actual developers of I2PD, the C++ version. He had an out proxy. So basically you could proxy stuff out and it would come out of his home network. But it's done, it's like routed over the darknet. So I came up with this stupid hack. I'm like, well, I could just use that as a proxy just specifically for github.com. So my traffic would like pop out somewhere in Ontario in Canada or something like that. And like that's how I had to like push for like such a long time. And then, you know, I don't know who it was, it might have been you, but somebody told me about NAT64. I'm like, wow, that exists. You can do that. And I'm like, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. So yeah, I had like, you know, it's good though. It teaches you things, you know, running into those problems. I wouldn't have known about NAT64, DNS64, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Joule, I think, was the one in kernel module you
Right.
could use for NAT64. And then there's also Tiger, which I think you had played with a while back, this user
I'm
space
still
based one.
Yeah, I still use it. I remember I added one boring night like multi-threading into it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the such a waste of resources because Joule is so much better, like handling traffic.
Mm-mm.
But I remember doing this. I'm still using it because for low traffic applications, it's totally fine. But yeah, I wouldn't do it in production, like and push serious traffic because it's such a waste of CPU. I remember doing some benchmarks with Tiger,
Mm.
and it was pushing like all the cores when I implemented MT. I was like, oh, just to get like 3.5 gigabits per second on a 10 gigabit line, I'm
Yeah,
utilizing
that,
eight
that is
cores.
wild to be maxing all
Ooh.
of that out. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, crazy, right? This IPv6 topic because I remember the first time I played with IPv6 was actually in 2007, and
Wow.
I
That's a long time
I
ago.
I
Yeah.
had this belief like, oh, it's coming any minute now, and my ISP is gonna have
You
it,
couldn't be
and
more wrong.
so it was quite a wild experience. Like back in 2013, I experienced the first rollout of IPv6,
Mm-mm.
and then I was like, wow, it's gonna happen. And this actually brought me back to tinker around with it more. And I'm still so upset that there are so many things which are not really supporting IPv6. Like just
Mm.
yesterday, I was playing around with Kubernetes, and
Yeah,
on
yeah.
AWS it got really strong. So you can have a managed Kubernetes IPv6 only cluster, which gives you many benefits because then you're no longer, because it's quite dumb. So on AWS you have like per instance a limit on how many secondary IP addresses you can have,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're using their Kubernetes implementation, each like pod which gets its own IP address is connected to this instance instance IP address. So it's not like doing any routing. I think you can set it up. I found some article describing some hack, or you can use a different CNI, this container network interface, which I was like, I actually want to use the AWS native CNI so that I know it's like proper and works, and you can use all the features you have with the virtual private cloud. And yeah, long story short, so usually you have like one IP address per the pod, and there's a maximum per instance type. You can like have 30 IP addresses max, and then I was like, oh, we're gonna have so many short-lived pods and containers in the future because we are thinking about some other stuff and what workload to schedule on this cluster. And then I was like, I need to go down the IPv6 route because then you get a routed network, and then you can spawn how many pods you want, and you can occupy IP addresses like crazy, and you don't have to think about subnetting because on AWS you have to think of like the whole network you're managing. You have to think when you start and designing.
So you kind of have to plan it out more so and assign like an IP per thing or whatever. Okay.
Usually IPv4 you get IPv4 you get a /16, and you can work with that, and a /56 for IPv6, which is plenty. But then you have to then create subnets and all the stuff, and then you need to really think about what do you want to do and what is the limit, and having lots of small lived containers when they are completed and they are not like purged again from the cluster, they are still occupying an IP address even though they are not running. So there are some caveats, and I was like, oh, I need to go IPv6 definitely. It's so future proof, and they have like everything is managed. You have net64, you have DNS64. It's there, it works. And I was like, yeah, it's so easy to set up and spin up, and it works. And then I wanted to install some payload, like RabbitMQ, the official RabbitMQ extension for Kubernetes, and it wouldn't come up because it was trying to communicate through IPv4. It couldn't resolve like the host names, and like the service discovery on Kubernetes is done through DNS. And it was like, yeah, NX domain. I'm like, no, not NX domain. There is a domain record for it. It's IPv6. And then I spent actually some time together with Claude, like the newest version of Claude, like Opus 4.6. It had some ideas how to like work your way around this limitation. Still, after like 2 hours, I was like, this is too brittle. I cannot use this in production. So I ditched like having RabbitMQ on Kubernetes because thanks to, first of all, AWS is huge. You have so many services. You never know what they have. You always have actively to search for something. And then Claude was like, oh, you don't have to use your own your self-managed RabbitMQ. You can actually use Amazon's managed RabbitMQ. Like, okay, that's it. RabbitMQ out of Kubernetes. We are going to use the AWS one because then it's done. And then I deployed the rest of the application stack, which we are using at the time, and everything was coming up. Everything was connecting. I was like, this is so cool now because completely the cloud workload is all networking over IPv6. There are a few services which are still IPv4, but like AWS is taking care with net64.
And that's also something it's also something that I've been trying to do. I got into Docker about a year and a half ago, maybe. My main thing was basically I want stuff to be reproducible. And then I started I took it a step further. I'm like, okay, let's put this stuff on Git, and then I'll manage my secrets on a different thing. So I started doing all of that, and then I eventually I wanted to do it just to see if it would work, like doing routed containers where each gets its, instead of doing that, the Docker TCP proxy, UDP proxy stuff, where it jumps from one namespace into the other thing. Instead of doing that, I'm like, well, can I give each container an IP from a subnet and have it routed? No NAT and anything. It took some time to figure that out. There was a guy on LinkedIn, actually, I only realized later, but his name is like Daryl Swer or something like that. He has a really good networking blog, because it's not obvious how to do this in Docker. You have to set the driver mode. You have to do like routed equals, you have to mode equals routed. And then the thing that really caught me off guard is there's two modes, and by default, it actually, so in Docker, you do the port mapping, normally port 8080 to 8080, whatever. But when you're doing the routed mode, you don't do the colon, you just do a port. And it's basically it firewalls everything for you. and then you have to explicitly say what you want it to not firewall. There's a way around that, but eventually I'm like, oh no, that's actually a nice feature because I can expose my database with a terrible password or whatever. Oh, but you can't get to it now because it's not port mapped. So yeah, I got into that, and I've almost finished migrating most of my services that I've been running to, first of all, managing it using Git, and then giving each container, for the most part, its own IPv6
Pretty cool.
address. Yeah, so it just works perfectly. And I may as well do it because IPv6. I mean, I've got so many different subnets on my network now, and I run OSPF on my routers. So if I do something down there with that Raspberry Pi behind that router, just boop, just appears. So no, it's good. It's I don't want to do the whole thing of like the year of the Linux desktop. It's the year of IPv6 and Docker. I'm a bit wary of that, but it might be there. I think if you're willing to learn, it's there. It's not difficult, but just finding it's not obvious. When you go to the documentation, it's always written from the IPv4 perspective first, and then you have to. Docker has docs on it, but you have to really go digging to find them. But yeah, I've had a good experience once I figured it out. So, I mean, if you want to do a lot of IPv6 stuff, even just playing around, like, you want to simulate having a lot of nodes online, you can do it with Docker. It's more price effective than buying a bunch of machines. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
Docker is, it's getting there.
Finally, I remember like in 2014-ish, 2015, I was fighting around with Docker, and IPv6 was such an afterthought. And there was ways to get it going. I remember there was one contributor on GitHub. He was doing a huge pull request with like, oh, this is what we need to do to get IPv6 like really going well on Docker. And then at some point, the maintainers, they were having some discussions around it, and at some point they abandoned the PR. And I was like, can someone please like
he did all the work?
Yeah. I was like, get it going. This is like how it's supposed to be. And then it took a couple of more years to actually get it somewhat like closer to the IPv4 implementation. And it's moving slowly, a bit too slow. But I'm really happy like Kubernetes did the same bullshit. In the beginning, they didn't support IPv6 at all. And then at some point, they were like, yeah, now you can select your address family, IPv4 or IPv6.
Then you select it and it doesn't work. That's the caveat. It's like, AFINet 6, but it doesn't work. It's missing like 10 of the most important features, something like that.
Yeah, they did it also quite weird. I remember setting up some prefixes and like, okay, this is the service IPs. This is like a virtual IP network. And it was giving me complaints like, yeah, too many IPs. And I was like, is it?
It's IPv6 dummy.
Yeah. And I was like, well, what is going on? And then I had to read the code and I was like, it's expecting like 16 bits for the hosts because this is what it was expecting for IPv4.
You know how many times I've come across stuff like that? Like the most annoying one for me with Docker that it took me a long time to figure it out. It's like, please only /64s work. And I'm like, dude, like this isn't like EUI 64, whatever. I could literally, why can't I choose anything? I don't have a problem with it, but it does like kind of, in some cases, if you are working on a bit of a scarce amount of IPs, like I have a good amount of space where I can do subnets within subnets. So I have enough available, but, it ends up like, dude, I'm like wasting so much now. And it's just stuff like that took a while to figure out. And that example you gave is weirder because at least /64 is a bit of a common thing in some v6 implementations. Yep. I don't like that it's forced in some cases. In some cases, it makes sense. Like the, when you're using the hardware identifier, like it makes sense of your NIC. But there are other cases where people just roll with it for some reason. I'm like, were you too lazy to do the math? I mean, this is really basic math. You just take a bunch of bits and you mask it. Like, okay, albeit it's 128 bits. Maybe you got some funny instruction to work and do all of that at once. But really, I mean, it can't be this difficult, So, stuff like that just grinds my gears sometimes. But I must say, I've entered a phase now where I've made amends with Docker and it's working on IPv6. So just please they mustn't change anything. Just keep it as it is or make it better. But please just don't change your weird defaults.
Yeah.
Not to mention the options you have to enable in Docker, the JSON file for the daemon, experimental IPv6, NF tables, default bridge all of this stuff. I've got it in a document now, actually, like of like, oh, when you set up Docker v6, copy and paste this like boilerplate JSON and just push it into there, you know. But yeah, it's what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I feel you. It's like that's why I'm always complaining. Like, oh, why is everyone who's doing something remotely with networking these days not considering IPv6 like the first class citizen? Because
Mm,
you get bitten so easily by IPv4 at the point where you try to scale. I mean, how many times I remember back then when we were doing some let's let's subdivide the network and like, how many hosts are we gonna expect on this one? What should we do here? What should we do there?
mm.
Is there gonna be a risk of renumbering? And with IPv6, you just slap it on. You carve out like plenty of space. Like, okay, this is like this data center. It gets a slash n or slash 44 or whatever, and
Mm.
then you have plenty of networks to actually
Do
waste.
you do
There's
you actually remember a while back there was that IPv6 Christmas tree
oh
that
yeah
you
yeah
could like
yeah
that whole thing that you're talking about where it's like just give them so many addresses. I mean, that was a great example of that because they would have, I think it was you could do RGB, so the two hex digits are 1 byte. So you'd need one, two, three, and then I think there was something else for intensity. So it was like four basically octets or whatever that you could use, and you'd send an ICMP packet to whatever that is, and
yeah
there were two more octets as well. So it was RGB brightness and then XY coordinates where you want to do that mixture of RGB brightness at that coordinate, like on a Cartesian plane. And well, so there was the IPv6 Christmas tree, which was just colors. But then after that, the same person who was running that, they put a webcam up here, and then in the background, I don't know what this building was, but it pointed down at like a house with a little what do you call those? Like those matrices, those LED matrices. But like a huge one, like the resolution was quite big,
yeah
and people were actually pinging it to draw. Some people wrote programs to send ICMP v6 packets to it so they could sketch out, drawings or whatever, and it was impressive. I mean, it's how the internet should be. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but it's like I want every LED to be addressable, over the
yes
internet.
yes yeah. I mean, this is it makes your life such
Easier,
easier.
just
Like
easier. Yeah.
uh that's why I was like, every time I'm setting up like something new, like on this project now this week with Kubernetes, I'm like, I want to have like a unforeseeable future. Like, okay,
Yes,
this can scale
exactly,
up,
exactly.
and I don't have to worry about this nuisance called addressing because it
Mm,
just works with IPv6, and then that's it. And also, like what you mentioned with having everything on GitHub with Docker, I'm such a big fan of infrastructure as a code these days. So I
mm.
remember back then I was like, ah, you're the guy, the wizard who's doing some mechanics and some plumbing, connecting some stuff, setting something up. You're hand drafting like all the configuration files. And these days I'm like, I cannot be bothered.
Yeah,
I don't want to go
no way I'm
through
doing that. Yeah. Oh, and don't
anything
forget
of
the
this.
other thing is when that machine crashes or goes down, rebuilding it. Like
Mhm.
I got tired of doing that, and some applications have like the worst configs. Like they are. I don't know if it is. There's one program I tried setting up a while back, but you'd get a few programs where it's like the default config needs to have like at least 200 lines of things specified. And you only tweak a few things. And I'm like, dude, no, like I want to have. And the thing is, for me, I came to this late. I saw people doing this stuff, and it was that initial hurdle of like to learn Docker. I remember once telling myself in the past, I'm not going to learn it. Like it's too hippie, it's too like it's what the people with the MacBooks and the mustaches and like it's what they
Yeah.
use. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, nah, that's not me, man. Like, and it sounded overcomplicated. But then I was like, let me learn it. Let me put that aside. It's like people that program in Rust. Actually, no, it's nothing like that because I'd never do that. But it's basically I had to overcome that hurdle. It took me months to learn because you have to learn Docker, Docker Compose, Docker how to build your own images because I had to do that because custom configs, all of that. You have to learn the networking. Then you have to learn all these other commands. And yeah, it just became a bit of a, can I say, like a month-long journey or maybe two. And
Yeah.
then I hadn't even learned everything. I had just learned effectively how to just get stuff working with v4. Then the IPv6 stuff came, and then I learned about N files, environment files, all that stuff. And now I'm finally where I am, and I'm quite happy. I'm confident in it, and I've also learned a skill. Like I actually know how to use Docker properly now. So yeah, I'd say it's worth learning. Like if you're gonna learn something, learn that and learn how to do it with IPv6. Like you may as well, because that's a niche skill. I mean, you can put that on your CV. Like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I made the same experience with Docker back then, and then so many things. I remember drafting the first Docker files, and then at some point I realized this is so stupid. Why am I rolling my own Docker files? Why
Mm-mm.
am why aren't I using like the existing ones and then just
Images, yeah, yeah.
slap my configuration on top of it? And
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, where
like
you do the whole like layering stuff. Yeah, I didn't. That was a new. So where you could take an image and then base stuff off of it. That was one thing I learned. And then also where you do the stages where you build. A lot of the times for the stuff I work with, like my IRC server, we use Unreal IRCD, and I build it from source. So what tended to
mhm.
happen was I'd have all of these dependencies and all the source files in this one huge image, and then right at the end I just run one thing. I'm like, and then I learned from other people. I'm like, oh, you can do this thing where you build it and then you copy the file into that one, and then you can trash that old thing. I'm like, maybe this isn't for people with mustaches that use MacBooks and are hippies. Maybe like normal people can also use it. Like I feel like I'm some sort of like guy that's gone out to learn a foreign culture and I've come back to preach it to the locals. I'm like, guys, don't worry, it's not that weird. It's normal. Um, and yeah, like I'm a Docker maxi. What can I say? I like it, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
If you can run it
same,
in Docker,
same.
you may as well.
And yeah, the next level is gonna be like, okay, now you want to do the whole scaffolding around. Like, I use Terraform these days for all the new
Mm-hmm.
projects because I'm like, I don't want to log in somewhere. I don't want to click like new server. I don't want to do anything of that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to define like these are my requirements, especially on AWS. I don't know if you ever came to
I've
this
never actually used it
joy.
before, but I've seen like how confusing it can be. Yeah, like I
It's
know, and I know it's confusing because if you've ever used Amazon's bookstore and you've seen how many buttons there are everywhere, they like the ideology of making things just yellow buttons everywhere and like colorful things everywhere. It's like so I've never used it, but I know what it would be like.
and then this times 100 because it's like this whole UI, it's so convoluted. Yeah, they got better the recent years to
Mm.
providing like reasonable defaults, like sane defaults, and giving you some hints like here, click this, do it like this. But I remember starting using it, and I was like, why is it so many clicks? First, you have to set up like basically your virtual data center, this VPC. Then you have to set up like all the subnets. Then you have to set up like your gateway. There can be a net gateway, and then you can set up like your instances. But then you can also set up like a load balancer, and then you can connect your instances. But this would be manual labor. You can use the auto scaling group, which can build or which can start new instances based on what you have already built. And there are so many little steps, so many configurations. And at some point, I was like, never ever gonna touch this again. If I'm doing
Mm.
anything, I'm just writing down like, here, this is what I want to have, and then let Terraform do the stuff. And the cool thing about like having a solution like Terraform, because AWS also has its IAC version, like it's called CloudFormation, where you can also
Yeah, I've heard of
describe
that
like
before. Yeah.
with I think JavaScript or Python, you can like you can code how your infrastructure should look like. And but with Terraform, you can do it like across multiple services, so you can
Provide That's the
actually
one thing I've heard about it. Like, so it's a standard, how can I say, like text format or whatever. But
yeah.
then there are different like companies, like so Amazon or okay, I don't know other ones, but Heroku, for example, they'll have something that can consume that, and it translates it to make sense on their platform. But it's one single config. Is that like the idea basically?
It can be used like this. So like it's called then providers, like AWS is one of
Hmm.
them. They still expose you like all the AWS products. So
Okay. Yeah.
you describe like, okay, I need a compute instance. But what you can do, you can basically do this across many of them. You can have dependencies. So for instance, in my setups, I define like, okay, I need this network here, I need this stuff on AWS, blah 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 blah. And then I take like, okay, load balancer has been created, and then it spits out like a domain name. This usually resolves to IP addresses. Then I put this in Cloudflare where I configure like DNS. And maybe there's a third service I'm using for something, like a different provider for I don't know what. And I can orchestrate everything using Terraform, like in one go. And I can actually have it reproducible. So
Mm-mm.
and automated. Like the most recent project I built the infrastructure for, it builds like Docker containers. It also builds like the whole setup on AWS and Cloudflare. And whenever there's like a build being done, so someone essentially push to the master branch, it will start like automatically building and deploying to staging.
Mm.
And there's a big button where you can say, okay, deploy to production, and you don't need to do anything. Terraform and the setup in GitLab in this case is like all connected and set up in a way that you don't have to touch anything anymore, and
So
everyone
you got
can
like a
see what
full
is actually
pipeline
happening.
from committing
Yeah.
something to pushing it to redeploying, rebuilding it, and everything. Oh, that's nice.
So I think, yeah, I try to set up everything like this in the future because I'm so fed up with setting up things yourself. I
Mhm.
mean,
I
like
don't want to
you
log into a
mentioned before,
machine, like you said, and type a bunch of commands. Like I'm just, it
right?
doesn't need to be done. And it for big things, especially even just for my home lab, like it's way too much. And the biggest problem that I faced, or what it stops you from doing if you don't do something that's reproducible, is you see some really cool shiny service you want to deploy on your home lab. Something simple, but you're like, oh, but if I deploy it, then what happens if I need to redeploy it? Now it's one more thing that I need to do. So yeah, no, I've become now it's a lot. I can actually just go browsing on Docker Hub and I just like find interesting stuff. I'm like, yo, let's deploy. And if I don't like it, then that's the great thing. It leaves no like trace or like rubbish on my machine. No funny
Yeah.
config files, weird things. Or the biggest thing is, your apt installs something and it's like, oh, it reconfigured something. And then you uninstall it. And in some cases, like it didn't reconfigure it because sometimes it can't because you have two things configuring the same file. So yeah, it's just an impossible mess. Like I can't see doing stuff without it, honestly. And even for small projects, like just do it because nobody wants to clone your GitHub repo and install Redis and install MySQL. Like it's just it's not.
Yeah.
You're going to lose customers in like an open source sense. People like that look at your repo on GitHub. They're not going to try it out because they're like, I'm not installing that, man. No. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, whenever I see something, I'm like, is there a way to try it out? And if there's a Docker file or if there's a Docker image, that's the best. Like, I mean, Docker run, whatever. And then you can spin it up and see how it's working. And then if you like it, then you can do a deep dive.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, no more installing some weird dependencies, some specific version of some service you need to have ready for this,
Mm.
and
Oh, and
then
then
your system's
conflicting
getting
versions. What
cluttered.
about that? If you have conflicting versions, yeah, that's another thing. It's like, oh, well, oops, we just can't do that then. Sorry. Like, there's just so much to gain from it. But like, yeah, really, if you're going to look at it, just study it deeply, go into all the things. Don't just like do the top, like, you got to start somewhere, but learn how to do your own Docker images because you're going to need it. Like, I mean, for example, at work, we haven't properly used it for the software that I'm like the lead architect on because it's kind of a new project and it runs as its own separate thing. But it was something that I looked into, and I did like put a bit of an image together because I'm like, like there's going to be no predefined image for this. It's something that you've created. You need to go ahead and make it. So learn how to do every single part of the Docker stuff. Learn, what it means. Learn the biggest thing for me was like you have to always ensure that your UIDs and GIDs match up so that files created in that ID namespace match the one
Mm-hmm.
here. And it finally clicked to me. I'm like, oh, when it makes a file over there, the file metadata has that ID. So therefore, when it appears on the other side, I need to be logged in as a user that either is in that supplementary group for that ID or is that. And so you learn actually a lot of stuff about Linux just in general. Um, so I'd say there are good headaches with it where you learn, it's a headache because you don't understand how to do this, but then you learn something from it. The V6 stuff was a bit of it didn't have to be that way, but you do learn whatever you learn from it. So, if anybody's watching and hasn't learned Docker, you got to do it. Do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, good point. It's also quite funny because in the past I always came across some developers on the typical MacBook. matcha latte slurping mustache guy, where they're developing something in Node.js on their notebook, and then they try to deploy it and try also like to maintain it. And I was always like, I don't know, I've been working for, I don't know, I started working in commercially in 2007, but before that I was working already on many projects, hobby
Mm.
projects. And I was always mind blown, like, why are there people like don't understand like the target configuration where they're gonna deploy their stuff. I always met like developers developing something and they had no clue how Linux works. And they had like some obscure idea, like, oh, if it's running there, then it will run and blah blah blah. And I was
Yeah,
like,
it's something like of the notion it's an executable and you just put it somewhere, you know?
mm-hmm.
Typical Windows .NET developer, but it's like, yeah, I don't want you to get an MSI installer or something like, bro, never heard of that, first of all. What is that? An exe? Where am I going to put it? It's like, oh, you just dump it somewhere. I'm like, typical Windows mindset. You just make a folder and dump it there. But on Linux, I want everything to be orderly. I want this has a place, it belongs there. That's where it starts up. It starts in that working directory, so it figures out where the relative paths are, all of that. But one thing I did want to say was speaking about hobby projects. I don't know if there's like, so, I mean, currently I know one of them is your Quake. It's WebGL based, right? Or how are you
Yes,
doing
right.
it? So yeah, how's that been going?
Oh boy, yeah. Actually, this is a learning project because I didn't start like porting the Quake engine thing to the web. There was some I think one, let's put it that way, a very determined person who ported like almost 10 years ago
Mm-hmm.
WinQuake, the original WinQuake to JavaScript using WebGL. And the way how that person like ported it is almost verbatim. Like you could put like the original source code WinQuake side
Mm-hmm.
by side with his project, and you could see like almost like the same idiosyncrasies. Like
So
there's
like a source
some
to source transformation type of thing. Like he
yes,
might have actually automated it, before AI, just like a C to JS translator, which I mean, there's a lot of those things existed for a long time. So.
yeah, but still, I'm like in a way which is like really fascinating because I found a couple of bugs or like uh, well, let's go back to step one. I got bored like doing after like Christmas, between like Christmas and New Year's. I was like, I want to tinker around with something which is really fun, because I learned coding because I wanted to modify like the classic Doom back then when I was little,
Mm.
because everyone was playing it, shooting demons and whatnot, and fighting some monsters. And I was like, oh, it's all fun and cool. I like it, but I want to, I don't know, convey my own story, my own like ideas. I want to use this as a platform to build something. So at some point, I got a map editor and started playing around. Then you figured out like, oh, there are some limits because the game Doom, classic Doom back then, it was so simple. You could extend the game by replacing some textures, like putting in some new graphics, and you could build
Mm.
your maps. But then you had like, oh, you cannot do this logic where you have to kill a certain enemy and then this platform will lower. This wasn't a thing because this was hard coded into the game slash game engine back then. So I was like, I want to have like this challenge where you have to kill like those three demons or whatnot, and
Mm.
then something will open up or something else will happen or there's some explosions. So how to do that? And then I realized, oh, there's source code. And back then I was lucky enough to have the Microsoft Visual Studio. I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
where
I
I got it
remember that
from.
stuff. I had it
um,
back in the day. I had like There was one version that was free. I think there was Visual Studio 2008 Express. Hella
oh yeah,
old
the
version, but it was the only free one. I mean, unless you got a cracked one, but I was a very good person. And also, I didn't know what a crack was back then, so I had this really
yeah.
old thing. And that was actually just a bit of a like side story. My first language that I ever learned was Visual Basic .NET, VB.NET. I had no idea what I
Classic.
was doing, but I was like using WinForms and like making buttons. I'm like, this is cool. This is really cool. Like I can do this. And then I think I went on to Python, and then at school we did Java, and then I started properly understanding programming. So, but yeah, just anyways, a bit of a sort of fun trivia over there. Yeah.
I mean, I, I mean, when I got access like to the Visual Studio, it was Visual Studio 6.0. So this got released, I think, in 1998. So it was really old, and I was able to compile like a version, a Windows port of Doom without any errors. So I was like, oh wow, I could get it running. So I could start tinkering around, and it was all written in C. And before that, the only experience I had was like similar like you, Visual Basic. I remember like not the .NET version, but like the Visual Basic 6.0, like the
Mm-mm.
same suite. Like Visual Studio had like C++, Visual Basic, I think some obscure stuff like J++, which was a Java version
Java,
of
yeah, Java that
by
ran on
Microsoft.
the CLR or something. Oh, and they also had what's that other F sharp? I don't know if they had it back
Yeah,
then, but they have that. It's like kind of like Haskell, like OCaml, but on .NET. Quite cool, actually.
yeah, they there was some obscure stuff like Fox Pro, maybe that turned into F
I
sharp. I
recall
don't
that, but I
know.
can't remember what that was. Wasn't it like a database thing or something? Visual Fox
No
Pro, something
clue.
like that.
But yeah, that was back then the stuff. And before that, I found Quick Basic or Q Basic. It was, I
QBasic,
think,
yeah, that's
part.
an open source one, I think. Yeah,
There was a
remember that.
Microsoft version,
Oh,
and it
was
was
there? Oh.
part of a Microsoft MS DOS distribution. I think
Hmm.
there was like I remember I found this one. I was really young. I think I was 8 or so, and I found this on some diskette, like floppy disk, we had lying around. I was like, "What's this?" And then at the same time, because we had like one computer, like the family PC, like
Yeah,
everyone in there
everybody
used.
goes to that one, and if somebody's using it, you have to wait. Oh, and the biggest thing on our side was we had that, but also, please don't touch the phone. The dial-up connection is open. That was the other thing
Yeah.
that we had.
Yeah. So did we. I remember like at some point, like my dad got so upset because it was constantly like blocking the only phone line you had. And then we got
Yeah,
this ISDN, which gave basically every subscriber two dedicated lines, which you could actually bond. You could get like twice
oh,
the
that's
speed
cool.
connecting to the internet at twice the price.
Yes, and,
But
and
you
but
could,
also now your dad would still be angry because it's like I bought the set, I have the extra line for phone calls. Now all you've done is you've just doubled your bandwidth. And the answer to your dad would have been buy another ISDN line, so I can get three of them, somehow bond them, and you can have the other one. You know,
well, like get us like a proper like T1 connection or
T1,
what
yeah,
they
yeah.
had. But yeah, that would have been out of reach. But yeah, back then we had this. I found this QBasic, and we had this family PC. And at some point, I remember I got a Commodore 64, and this was like pure basic. There was nothing else. You had to type in all the basic commands, and this is how I kind of learned like basic. And then I rediscovered QBasic, and I was like, oh, I know this. I know print. I know this and that. I know how to do some functions and if and whatnot. And yeah, at some point I came across JavaScript. I think it was the late 90s, which became a thing at some point, which was really cool because it was quite easy to understand, especially if you're 9 years old. You don't have this deep knowledge, and I don't know, your brain
About
is,
pointers and all of that stuff and memory.
yeah,
You get a variable when you do something with it. But I also think with JavaScript, the other thing, and this goes to web development in general, maybe it was of all the languages probably available then, it was most likely the easiest to get a something that was a semblance of a UI. You know, you could immediately
yeah,
see the result. You know, and if you compare that to other languages, it might have been significantly harder to get that done because it's so easy in JavaScript. I mean, you get like I don't know, you're one method or one function away from access to the DOM, and you can then draw anything. On other languages, make a window. You need to, it gets it's not that obvious. And it also, I think the reason there were probably a lot of resources is that the web was just a cool thing. So at that time, it was, if you're going to learn how to do something, that's where the majority of the tutorials are. I don't know if you remember like W3 Schools, that site.
yes.
Yes, I still go there because I don't know how to make an HTML form. I keep forgetting about it. So
uh,
I still go there, dude. Like I forget you have to set the ink type and then the method and then have to label things correctly. I was actually doing that recently for a project I was working on, because I learned Go recently. Um, and there's like a little web interface that I'm building. It's long story short, it's actually some DNS stuff. It's weird, I must say. It's weird how one of the things you were working on back in the day was domain related. We've come full circle. It's like I'm always 10 years after you. I don't. Okay, but it's really DNS heavy, and it it's for a specific use case. But in effect, what it is, it's kind of like a subdomain registrar. That's
Yeah.
basically what it is. And there's going to be Unbound running in the background. There's a nice library that I got that you can interact. Unbound has like a control socket you can use to add and revoke records. So I'm
Hmm.
going to manage it with that, store everything in Redis. And then when it starts up, it's going to load everything in. And there's a little UI. We can register your subdomain and add records and stuff. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, like anyways, but I don't know how I got onto that, but I just thought I'd mention it because you were literally doing something like this 10 years ago, and now I'm like, damn, I should do something like that. Definitely hasn't been done before. Um, so yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, yeah, like this JavaScript. This is really like you said it. You can set up like HTML. Back then, there was Front Page Express. I remember. So I really tortured the family PC, and I went through every CD-ROM we had, or on every box with some software. I played around with it, and so I learned a little bit of JavaScript. Well, like you said, you can set up, especially with a WYSIWYG editor, you can spin
Mm-mm.
up a form, you can connect some stuff, and then you can add a script, and then cool. And I remember then going to the Stoom, and I was like, oh, C looks similar like to JavaScript, curly braces, ha ha ha,
Must be
parentheses,
the
and
same
there's
thing.
some.
Haha, easy, easy, very easy. Definitely won't crash my program.
It was such a steep learning curve because not
Mm.
only that you learn the syntax, and then you have this nice two-edged sword called pointers, where you can read from anywhere from the memory and have no clue about it. And
Mm.
this was like the tools. But then I was like, what is a linked list? Like there's some stuff you imagine you're 10 years old, you're going to school. At school you're learning, I don't know, 5 + 5 × 3. And then you're going back to your computer and you're like, what is a heap? What is a linked
Mm.
list? Why is
Or
this
how
why
do I remove a node from a linked list? The age old question. Oh, how am I going to do it? Can I do it with only two variables? I don't think you can. I think you. No, isn't there a hack? I'm pretty sure there's some weird thing I saw somewhere where you can use XOR somewhere. I don't know if it's true. I think it's fake news, but I think you need three variables to swap to remove a node because you need to stitch something there. No, do you need? No, you don't.
there
I don't know.
was
You always need three. It's the magic number. There always needs to be a temporary variable somewhere with this stuff. If you're doing a
I know
doubly
that.
linked, back and forth.
Yeah. I remember that Linus Torvalds, he was, I think, talking about some really clever way of handling doubly linked lists with a pointer. I remember I think I was reading some article or blog post on it, and I was
Mm.
like, wow, this is so cool. Like, this is so easy. No longer checking like if previous is null, blah blah blah.
Mm-mm.
You can easily like have a null pointer dereference here and there if you do it wrong. So yeah, these are the stuff. You're 10 years old. You're sitting in front of the PC. You're like, I have no clue. What is a linked list? At some point, with trial and error, you get an idea. And then there's an array. Okay, array. I know JavaScript. There's an array. You can push items to this and remove them.
Mm-mm.
And then you learn the hard truth. Like, no, this is not how this works. You have
And I
to
think
actually.
the biggest thing for me was I learned it much later. I tried once when I was in school. I'm like, you go through the tutorials like this, how you print something to the screen, but then you're like, what the hell is struct file star? And I had this tendency. I'm like, dude, if I don't understand it, I just shouldn't do it. I stick to something simpler because I don't like the idea of like, you know, learning it like a parrot when I don't actually understand what's going on because then I have no idea. Um, but later on, when I got to university, we learned it in second year, but I already started learning it maybe like a year before or something. But the way I learned it was, I really want to understand what was happening because I had a good idea of how it worked, but I'm like, what does it look like in memory? So I would use GCC and I would ask it to output the assembly. And that way
Oh
I
yeah.
learned so many things. what I learned was like the biggest thing I learned was like, wait, there are two ways to store a number. So a number that's greater than 1 byte, it's either big or little Indian. And I was like, why is it stored backwards? Why is the number 65, like in a short stored, why is it 65 zero or whatever it was? I can't remember which way it was. No, 65 and then zero. It should be the other way around. And then I'm like, oh, there's a ordering to this stuff. And I'm like, oh, and it's different depending on what machine type you're on. I'm like, okay, so I started getting a good mental model of how it actually looked in memory. And yeah, that's basically how I learned. And what I would do is I'd take that output assembly because I couldn't write assembly from scratch, but I knew,
Yeah.
if you put funny numbers like 420 or 69, you'll see it in the assembly. I'm like, okay, that move, that to EAX is my code. So I'd then go in there, I'd twiddle it a little bit, learn how to add numbers using the registers, and then I'd recompile that assembly. I'm like, oh, now it's working. And then I learned about other things like what is the stack pointer? What is the base pointer? How do they interact? How do they unroll properly? Pop that goes to EIP, you jump back there. And then also the other biggest thing for me is like arrays and variables of the same type are the exact same thing in memory. It's like, there's no difference. They're just stuff stacked next to each other. So I was able to get a very good mental model from the beginning. And I used to always tell my computer science friends whenever we were studying, because some people, they didn't understand the concepts. And, I always try to help as best as I could. And I was like, dude, forget it. There's no such thing, okay, as a pointer. There's no such thing as a type, okay? All there is an address and a value. And you interpret that value however you want. Oh, is it a pointer? No, it's just a value that you interpret as an address. So like, I used to just make this joke like, dude, it's just bytes, bro. Like everything's just bytes. Like kind of as like
Yep.
like, dude, forget about it, give up, bro. It's just bytes, bro. It's like, oh, but it's of the wrong type. I'm like, bro, types. What are you talking about? But they don't exist, man. Like, what are you going on about types, dude? So yeah, and that became like a running joke. But it was a good way to actually help people get a good mental model. And I don't program for a living in C. I do Java, but it really helps you. You should understand how your computer works. Let me put it like that. And C is the easiest way to do that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more because I had a similar learning experience. I didn't go through the assembly output and try to go
Manually
back from
debug
there.
it, yeah.
But it's a really, really good way because I remember like the Visual Studio Code, it had a pretty good debugger at the time.
That you could
So you
attach
could
whilst it was running, yeah.
Yes, and then you had like your assembly here, and next to it there was like the actual code, and you could step through it, and you could also, in a limited way, change it during
Yeah.
runtime and then continue. So there was a lot of things where I was like, oh, there's no such magic thing like I don't know. I had some weird like assumptions, like how arguments would be passed to a function call, and then you would learn like about calling conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and you'd see everything's being put. Why is everything backwards, man? Why is the closest? Why is the closest argument? Oh no, sorry. Why is the closest one the one that's like last pushed or something like that? And I was like, and then you learn about ABIs because once you realize everything's just bytes, you realize you have to compile your code so that it lays out stuff. It lays out stuff in a way that another thing who's also compiled like this will be expecting to read it. And then the reverse. If you want to use somebody else's code, you need to use their calling conventions, at least just for that function, because they're expecting stuff to be laid out in a certain way. And then you get into like foreign function interfaces, all of that stuff. And it's just really amazing because you also get to start playing around and inventing your own things. Like that's what I try to do a lot of times. I'm like, well,
oh
let's
yeah,
just push these arguments in the reverse order, like who are you to say that you're doing it the right way? I like to do it the other way, So it just really fun stuff like that. And you begin to you start also understanding, you'll read conversations online and you start actually understanding what these technical conversations are and you get a better and better understanding. And next thing you know, you're like, if you look back a few years, you'd be like, I would never understand this. I'm just a dumb person. And then, it's one of those things where you gain knowledge. You don't know you're gaining knowledge. You don't see like one day, damn, I'm kind of smart actually. I'm not saying it as like me, like I always feel like I'm learning, but eventually when you start speaking to other people that are in the stage where you were in the beginning, they're like, damn, you're really smart. I'm like, it doesn't feel like
yeah,
that. It just feels like I
yeah.
kept learning every single day. So it's just a long process, but it's worth it. If you want to do computer science or not even at a university, just if you want to know how to program, like just if you want to write software, it's a good take the long, hard, difficult road.
Yeah,
Everybody can do the easy stuff. Like there's no shortage of that.
absolutely. Like this is like this feeling. Like I always have this feeling like, oh boy, there's so much I don't know about. I can always learn more. I can always get a better understanding of XYZ.
Mm,
And then when it happened to me, like on many customer projects where there wasn't a problem and everyone was kind of stuck, and then I was sitting down and after like 20 minutes, like, oh, let's do it this way. It works. And they're like,
mm,
how? Why? I mean, yeah, nice. I get it. And seeing the solution, I totally understand why this works, but how did you get there? And I'm like,
yeah. How did you actually come up with it? Yeah.
that happened to me a few times where I was like, oh yeah, they never went to this actual struggle of really dissecting a real
Mm,
hard problem. They were
yeah.
always, I don't know, I see it quite often in people who learn coding by just, I don't know, learning Python from some online course. And then they're completely stuck when it comes to like those data structures or like also scalability. I remember there was one project I was working, or one company. That was so funny. They in the beginning they were like, "Oh, we need you for one certain thing, 6 weeks tops. Could you please full time help us on this one thing?" Ended up staying there for 12 months, and because there were so many small things where they were asking me for like, how would you improve this? And then there was
There was a lot to
there were
improve. Yeah.
there were some situations like they had some simulations. They wanted to do some simulations, some runs of some stuff, and they were getting the result, and then they were storing it in memory, and then after like millions of iterations, they would then do like proper like usually summing it up and getting an average and whatnot. And sometimes only like tally count, like there's an outcome, and then they're like +1. And I remember they were like, "Oh, we need bigger machines. There's so little memory." I was like, "These machines have like 384 gigabytes. How
Yeah.
are you ending up thrashing
How are
up
you consuming
300?
all of that? Yeah.
How?" And then I took a look at the code and was like, "It's so easy. Arithmetic." They're like, "What do you mean? You have 32 outcomes. You want to count it up? Just do it on the fly, +1 each time. Do the
Mm.
evaluation after each iteration." And they were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I
What do you
mean,
mean? What do
really?"
I mean?
I was like,
Yeah.
build it like this, try it out, and sure, it didn't really fit into this framework. They had some really
Mm.
convoluted framework, but I was like, yeah, gut this out, do it this, still use this API, but just do the tally count right away, write it back, done. And then they were like 2 hours later, they were like, we did the tests, the simulations, whatnot. It worked. It had only consumed like 50 megabytes of RAM. I'm like, yeah, how come? If you don't
Yeah,
need to
from
store all
50 gigs to 50 megabytes. But yeah, it's one of those things. Like it's like you said, the whole doing tutorials is good, but my experience, like I did when I was learning Go, like I learned it from scratch, and I did a tutorial. I did the official tutorial. But what I have a tendency of doing is, and I think this is maybe good advice, is don't just skip past things. A lot of the times, these tutorials, even the official Go one, really it hides a lot. I mean, Go does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I mean, that it has like the whole thing of value semantics and stuff. It's
Mhm.
actually got, I haven't read the internals, but I've read the internals of enough languages before where I know the little secret things that they're doing here, because you'll come across things like how is it possible that I can return a pointer to something that was declared quote unquote on the stack? Hint, it's not, it's in the heap. Because in C, if you do that, it's like, okay, it works. Then you call a function, and you're like, damn, that
Boom.
function had the value 2 in it. Why did it change to 2? So stuff like that. So pause on each section that you've done. You won't do it in the beginning, but when you get to complicated topics, don't just click next onto the next section. Spend some time on that and play. And I wrote a bunch of files and documentations, like different test files where I could test my conception or what I thought was going on. And then when I was wrong, I'd go read up about it. So I built this whole repository, and it's actually something I want to publish because it was how I learned it, and I've sent like a zip file of it to my friends. Because I'm like, I went through all the I walked so you could run, um,
Yeah.
and I basically, that's how I learned stuff. So, and that's from a noob perspective. I was going into that language new. I have experience with other things, but Go is quite different to what I'm used to. And that's how I learned it. And then I spent about, maybe it was like 3-ish months on it, and like really like an hour every day. That's what I tried to like do. And now I'm already like writing some stuff in it for some hobby, some upcoming stuff like the one I mentioned with the domain stuff. That's all in Go. So yeah, if you want to learn something, just you this kind of goes against the whole, like, I mean, if you're looking at from like I'm looking for a job sort of thing, time is of the essence sort of thing. But really, like, if you can just, if you have a way, like, if you can put something in your day that you do that takes up an hour and just not do that, not saying essential. I mean, please do shower and like eat, but if you can rather just spend that 1 hour just grinding away at that, then you can both put it on your resume. Maybe you get hired for it, but you also deeply understand it. And that's, I mean, it's even beneficial to a company. They want to keep you. They want to retain you if they know, we have 7 developers that know Go, but only one of them knows the intricacies of it. Like, if there's a bug, it's going to go to that guy. It's not going to go to the other 6. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say just you have to go deep on these things. And it builds up your knowledge for other languages. Now, then it's very easy for you to learn new things, because there's only so many different ideas out there. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, this methodology, this is really, really interesting. Also, like with this, take an hour every day, do this, do this. This is
Mm,
compounding as well. Like every time, especially now going back to this Quake project, because this is my playground to learn more about 3D graphics and whatnot, and game states and all the shebang. Yeah, I learned so much just from tinkering around, but spending like here and there, like sometimes it's 3 hours a week, sometimes it's 0 hours, and sometimes it's like every day 2 hours. Depends on how much time I have. And I'm learning so much because it's compounding. Because in the end, I'm like, I don't know how many hundreds of hours I
mm, mm,
probably spent into tinkering around with this, but I learned so much from it. And yeah, this details to know, because yeah, I noticed this sometimes. I get the hard bugs because, yeah, everyone else, I don't know, they have like the superficial knowledge about
mm.
something, and they have some assumptions. And I think what you mentioned, you learn something, you write it down, like
I have a text
what
file.
you.
So with the code, I've actually written like the .go files. I then
Mhm.
have markdown files, and they're all organized in folders. Like, I literally had one. This is what you do when you begin programming. Like, I had one called variables, just learning about variables. Very simple topic, but it's got to be done. Then I had one on Go routines, channels, all of these things. And you must always have written notes. Don't assume you can go back to the code and like figure it out from there. And all of the code's heavily commented. I'm talking about like 20-line comments for a single statement,
Mhm.
because I want to deeply understand like what's going on here, and I want to have a history of like what it is that I understood. So yeah, you have those two things combined. It's like when you study for
Yeah.
an exam, you learn the formulas, so the code, but you're explaining why it does what it does. And in mathematics, especially like university mathematics, if you don't understand what's going on, um, you're going to fail the test. You need to understand how the internals of the function work, not just, you just use that over there. So yeah, documentation, and everything ordered, and yeah, keeping a routine, just an hour per day. And if you're really getting into it, then continue a little bit more, but don't try and force it. And that's the thing. That's why I hesitate to, don't do it if you're going to apply to a job in like a week, because there's no way you're going to learn the language in a week. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
So make a choice of something you want to learn, um, and continue with it, and do it because you want to learn it, not because you can do it for a job. But you have your time. You're going to need a month at least to properly learn a language. And if you're new to programming, it might take 3 or so
Much longer.
if you dedicate
Yeah.
it. So,
This is yeah, this is so interesting because I did also in the past quite a lot of hiring. Um, there are some tricks. Like I was always like, some they are doing this puzzles. Like here, there's some do some, I don't know, implement quicksort, or like
mm,
fizzbuzz, some bullshit like that. And then I'm usually like, tell me about the hardest bug you faced in recent months and how did you solve it? And then the person has to reiterate, like, okay, this was like what we were facing, and
mm,
these were the steps a colleague already took, and then now I was working on this. And then I tried to get like an idea, like how, like what is the methodology, like how would they approach such a bug or situation. And then from that, how deep is the knowledge? Like, at what point is, for instance, like, oh, this was so weird, this bug, it must come from some low level stuff because I've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I cannot come up with a good example, but something which is like not really directly related to, let's say, a programming language, but like some weird thing which, let's say, Linux is doing differently than macOS. So I'm usually observing, like, okay, and I don't say anything. Sometimes when I see people get stuck, I'm like, oh, have you ever thought about this, or like blah blah blah, to steer them a little bit. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
always like try to like get like the whole thought process going on, what is
Yeah,
happening in
to
their
see how they
mind, and
ended up there. Yeah.
yeah, and then usually I learn something, which is then the seal of approval. Where I'm like, okay, this is perfect. This is a person I can actually learn from. This is always like the net positive for me.
And it's also like breaking things down into small steps. So like I'll tell you the biggest project I've worked on. The second biggest one is the one at work that I'm doing. Um, maybe not as maybe now it's as big because it's been a few years, but the biggest project I've worked on, which is still something I am working on, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because it has to do with how you segment, your work. Work on things in modules. A lot of people might be turned off doing a project because they're like, I don't know everything I need to know about that. It's like just start on the first thing. And I mean, I'm giving a hint about what it is already. It's obviously a compiler because we all know it's really well segmented. Your Lexer, your parser, code generation. And look, I did have some experience with parsers and stuff and compilers from university, but the one that I've written drastically surpasses that in terms of features and functionality. So, and I had learned a few things because I always had an interest in programming languages, especially I always wanted my own, so I had
Yeah.
kind of looked into these things. How do you do lexing? Like, how do you write a while loop that consumes all the white space until it gets a letter? Then it consumes a bunch of letters and then it splits it up. It's an array. And, you just start off with something like that. And that was the first thing I started off with. Then you write your unit tests, everything. Then you move on to the next thing, how to do the parser. Now, okay, that wasn't obvious to me. I had learned that at university, but then I had it in the back of my head. And then we had done like a little bit of type checking and code generation, but what I had to end up doing was like significantly more complicated. But it spanned multiple years. I just worked on it consistently and I kept adding stuff. I had some inspiration here and there. It's kind of weird, you hear an idea from somebody and you don't really process it because I'm not one of those people. I have to see the code physically. If you just tell me something, I won't get it. I won't understand actually what you're saying. But something that sat in my head from my one friend, Gustav, and he had actually did the reverse. He wrote a decompiler for his university
Mhm.
project from bytecode to Scala. So you could, reverse it basically. And he had mentioned this interesting thing you could do with a stack where, if you do 1+1, what you do is you actually push the left hand side, the right hand side, the one and the one, and then you push, um, you basically create a tree out of it, and then you create this you use a stack to process everything. So one and one plus, you put it on there, then you pop off two. You basically calculate the stuff like that. And so I had all
Mhm.
these different ideas that started. They only happened when I needed to work on that part of the project. So I didn't have any real anxiety. I'm like, I have enough knowledge, like very little, but enough to start work on this. And it's that whole thing of crossing that bridge when you get there, like when I needed
Yeah.
to do code generation and type checking, this is the one thing with the project. I never looked online. I just sat at my table. I'm like, well, what is it that I need to do? What is the actual problem? We just think of something basic. And the nice thing about that is that you're not being spoon fed anything. And it took me several rewrites. I only got it right on the third full rewrite. Like I had to rewrite this thing a bunch of times. And then I had to change how I was using it. And yeah, once I got that working, I had a really deep knowledge of how my own code worked, and it was so cemented in my memory that I could go months without touching the project. When I came back, I was like, boom, right in it again, which is very hard for me to say for other projects. Like trying to come back into a project after not touching it is hard. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, but the takeaway from that is like just compartmentalize everything and work on one part. Once that's working, move on to the next and just hone in on saying, don't be distracted with, oh, I have 7 requirements. Focus on requirement one, get that done, move on to the next thing and just think about it. But this goes back to what you were saying, people that have superficial knowledge versus, it's people who have superficial knowledge and versus those that have deep knowledge or they don't, but they have the desire to learn that deep stuff.
Yeah.
If you have the desire, that's what I had. I didn't know the stuff back then. I just said, well, I'm not gonna. And the other thing is this: it was a passion project. I'm like, how could I possibly flex on my friends if I copy and paste code online? Like, no, I need to have told them that I suffered whilst writing this. So, and it's cool, it's nice to know that you can do something. What's the point of studying anything if you can't, it's like a waste of, if you went to university, it's definitely a waste of money then if you can't actually use it. And if you learned something, like you learned whatever skill it is, but you never use it, what's the point? Then you wasted your time. Why did you do it in the beginning? So you may as well make the
Yeah.
full use. You got a brain, use it.
Absolutely. I also like this. This, you have a vague idea, gonna try it out, and then
Mm,
you learn from there, and you have so many different ideas, like the whole Quake project. I had also so many weird assumptions. Also back then, when I started tinkering on classic Doom when I was little, I was like, oh, this is. I had some weird ideas like how the data might be organized, and then you go through the code, and then you learn some stuff. I remember I was so proud of myself to in retrospect, so silly, but I wanted like having like a small number telling me the distance to the next enemy in the map, and
mm,
I
mm,
was so proud of myself. I was like, yeah, this is like you basically you calculate the distance in your coordinate system, and then you try out, you go over all like the things in the world,
mm,
check
mm,
like what the thing is. If it's like, it's called an actor, I think, classic Doom, then it's an enemy. And then you then check like, okay, what is the smallest value, and then blah blah blah. So super simple, but
yeah.
in
And from the
retrospect I'm like,
outset, it might sound like a big thing, but you broke it down. First, figure out, is there a way, given my position? First of all, enumerate all the actors. Get a
yeah.
list of all of them that exist. Okay, what is it that I need to do? I don't know, Pythagoras, whatever it is, whatever algorithm it is, from you to that one. Okay, now apply that to every single one in the list. Make sure the list is sorted. Choose the one at index 0 if it's in ascending order. You have your closest enemy. So if you just break things down, into things like that, then it's not a big problem. There's no problem that's like too hard to tackle. I think there's very few, at least in programming, that are, because there are other fields. I mean, curing cancer is kind of like shooting in the dark. But
Yeah.
programming isn't like that. It's, you can build bit by bit. You can't do that. You kind of just need to be lucky sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah, and I was learning so much, and in retrospect, it's so easy. In these days, I would think like, oh, it was so silly. I should have queried the BSP tree, because then I have the information even faster. I wouldn't do like this ON complexity, going over the list
Mm,
of enemies each time. So, and but yeah, to get to this, you have to walk like so many wrong paths to get an idea and to figure it out how it works. And I
mm,
was always happy to learn something, even and see it working, and even though it was trash, and then I started again. Same with the
mm,
Quake
mm,
engine now. I'm again like no clue what it's doing. And I have to say, like, all this AI stuff and the AI agents, they're so useful to explain stuff to me, because I'm not
mm,
like
mm.
some monkey who's like, oh, I need this, please build it. Okay, there's some
Please vibe
magic.
code me a compiler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some cliff gibberish. I have no clue what the matrix is trying to tell me, but I guess it works. But here I'm like, okay, I have this setup here. Please explain me how this actually works, and it's doing a great job. And I'm like, oh, now I know how this works with the VSP tree. Here, I need to split up
Mm,
like all the lines and planes, and then cut it from there. And or like this is the first project where I'm using an octree, because at some point I needed to organize like points in a 3D space, and I want to
mm,
query like the closest neighbors in the fast way, because I had so many points where you cannot go over the list every time.
mm.
So there were so many things. I'm like, this is so cool. Like this, I like this process of acquiring
And it's
knowledge.
very
And
domains, but it's like you learn, like I've never heard of those tree types before, but you're learning, you would never come across that. Like I'm not one person, I don't like learning something just for the sake of learning it. Like I'm not going to open my
yeah,
book today and be like, today I'm learning red, black trees. I'm like, I don't even know what they are. I don't even remember. When I need it, I'll go and learn it. And this is a great way. You enjoy the project, and now you need, I don't know, a tree that organizes stuff by X, Y, and Z or whatever. So you end up learning these things. And that's why it's good to maybe also, try and have, we all have our interests, but try, see if you can do a lot of different projects, with programming that are kind of different, like networking, compilers. Something that I haven't done really I've never done any graphic stuff. I've done some GUI stuff, but I mean like OpenGL, for example. So there would be a lot of stuff that I could learn if I literally just spent even just like a few days just learning it. I'd
Oh yeah.
gain a bunch of knowledge. And it's, no knowledge is useless, unless you're learning Rust. That is useless. Yeah.
But yeah, it's so. Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point. Like people are asking me, like, "Oh, I want to go into IT." Like this is I've been asked this I don't know how many times before, and I'm always like, "You don't go and learn a programming language just for the sake of it.
No, no.
At least you can do it, but it won't. It would get you anywhere
You're
because
not going to work on as hard on as you would if you have to like it. Like that's the thing. It's the same as people who, and I knew a lot of people like this. I think they're doing fine, like financially, but it's people that like, I'm doing the computer science degree because it pays well. I didn't know it would pay well, and that happens to be the case. I am paid well for what I do, but like I really like programming. Like that is it. Like I just like it. It's my interest.
yeah,
And so that's why I will learn a new language. It's really, what's actually better is there are people that might be technical, but they don't like programming. You get people where it's just their job, and it's like, yeah, I learned it, but it's not really what I want to do. They won't progress that much, and it's not their fault. It's not their interest. But they got a job and they want to feed themselves, so understood. But then you also get people that they really want to. There's something in them. It's like, I want to understand how a computer works, or I want to build something. And because they find it just interesting. And those people, they come from a background with no programming experience, and they do pretty well because they enjoy it. They find it interesting in and of itself, not just the outcome.
yeah,
And that's one thing that I've been big on. I find the code that I've written, it's not the product, but it's almost part of the product is how I see it, especially with open source. It's like, I value it a lot. At the end of the day, yeah, somebody gets to use a compiler, but I also see it from the other point. What if people want to contribute to it? Then the end product isn't what they care about. They care about the code. Is it extendable? Is it modular? Is it easy to
yes,
understand? And that's where, true passion really comes in. And I think that's just if you want to do well, it's just a requirement. You need that. You need to be passionate about whatever it is that you do.
absolutely. I mean, this is what I'm trying to tell people. Like, I didn't learn coding because for the sake of it. I learned
Mm.
coding because I started with extending Doom, and then it got me like in so many different challenges because I had more ideas. At some point, I wanted to have like an online lobby, like back then
Mm.
already. I was like, okay, now I need to learn how to build like a website, a backend. How is the game supposed to communicate with my web server? So I was
Mm.
then learning HTTP because ignorant me, I didn't know about libcurl. That's why I wrote my own HTTP client and see it is hell of a cluster fun. And yeah, but I learned it. I know like how to write like an HTTP 1.1
Mm.
request, and I can handle it. And there's also this chunked encoding and stuff. So I learned
Yeah.
so much, which I'm not using again libcurl, but I learned from it. And then yeah, you go down there because I'm a person, I want to build something. So
Yeah.
not necessarily like I love to produce code. I'm more like I love to produce something I can share with others. Can be code
Mm.
as well. Who knows? So yeah, that's why I'm always like, what's your real intention to learn coding? Is it like
Mm.
you want to have a challenge, or do you expect like a well-paying job? Because
Yeah.
there are different like venues to go down like to your
Mm.
goal. So
And
I'm
like
more
a good
like,
example on that is like, I mean, I could have, well, could have. I would have been too lazy to do this. I'm not. I really dislike coding interviews. Um, Probably because I'm lazy. I'm like, dude, I'm done with exams. Just treat me like an adult, like
yeah,
an adult, man. Like, I really don't want to do this. Like, come on, man. I get what they're trying to do, but I'm like, you just go look at my GitHub, please. Just go look at the GitHub, just really quickly, man. I promise you, it's good. And so I could have done the thing like apply to Amazon, because Amazon, like right off the bat, they pay on entry. significantly more than your entry level job when I started out. Well, I've climbed all
Yep.
the way up to there now, and it's fine. But I would have been, I would have hated it working at Amazon. Like I have friends that work. I'm like, if you get an interesting project, maybe it's nice, but like you're just a number in a company that big. Like the company I work at is like, I don't want to say it's a family business, but it kind of almost is the size. It's maybe like 40 people or something like that. But that
Yeah.
means you get put on really interesting projects. And I got put on one that I was able to like completely architect. I just had to make it conform to a few standards. But and maybe I should actually talk about that. I can talk a little bit about it if you want, because that might actually be an
Yeah, please.
interesting topic. So I got basically put on a project. Obviously, if you get hired at a company, sometimes they'll tell you why they're hiring you. They did in my case. They're like, yeah, we need somebody. We have a new idea that we want to implement, and it's a whole new thing. I didn't really have context of what it was they were talking about. The hint, it has to do with electrical meters, smart meters. Um, and I'm like, okay, cool, like let's do this. My friend was working at the company and I had let him know like 6 months prior, like, hey, if there's an opening, like, just let them know, like, because obviously they're going to put their feelers out to find people. I'm like, dude, you could just have me added to the list. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee they'll take me, but it's like, you know, friend of Steven. So that's the guy that I work with. And it's like, yeah, this guy Tristan, he's you should check him out, consider him. So did the interview and everything like that, and then I realized, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm working on this project, and then went on for like a good number of months. I'm like, damn, I'm making a lot of technical decisions by myself, not completely. I have input from the lead. I forgot what the title was, like the lead architect or tech architect. So he obviously looks at everything for all the different projects. But for the most part, I mean, how the interface design is done, how the type structure is done, just all the different components, how everything starts up and runs. I had a lot of freedom with that, and I still do, and it's one of the things I like about the company I'm at. And yeah, I basically got to make all of these decisions, and it wasn't like I'm not one of those people where it's like I do it the first time it's correct, like, and I won't change. I'm like, no, I will, because other business requests come in, and that's a good balance. It's like you design it like this is how you think it's going to be used, but then you have these two forces, counter opposing forces, and it helps you figure out, okay, obviously I need to listen to them. That's where the money comes from. I can't ignore them. I need to implement a mechanism to make those features implementable or to make them work. And then at the same time, it's like, well, I want the system to be very generic. It needs to work for a bunch of stuff. And it didn't have to be that way. It could have been hyper specific, but after some time, I'm like, I like it when you have the right abstraction, stuff can, you can have drastically different things work together. So yeah, I got put on this project, and long story short, what it basically is the company I work at, they do billing, processing basically for electrical meters. So, you'll go to a store, buy some electricity. You either get a token that you physically put in. In that case, it doesn't really go through our system. But if you get like a digital thing, then you give them your meter's number, like a little serial number on it. It then gets switched through our system. There's a bunch of payment providers that are linked into it. And obviously, you could imagine for certain meters, you need to send them that token over the air, like over the net.
Mhm.
And the way that they were and still are for different providers, I guess, is they were using external, how can I say, like external services that would do that. So they'd call out to a service that then connects to the meter and does it for you. And they still do that. They offer it like, I mean, you can look at it online. So it's called BizSwitch, that from iPay, and that's the name of the software. And normally the strategy is that you'd buy BizSwitch for the switching services, and then we have a list of supported, I guess, backends that for controlling meters. But now you can kind of see, now it becomes two things, a license for that and a license for that. So you're paying for two things. So iPay and it is a great idea, honestly. I mean, business wise, it makes sense, but it's also, it's something that we can control, because now we can be like, oh, we can only take on that customer maybe if they have this support, or we look at customers and see what they're doing. We're like, okay, yeah, we can add support for that meter. And that's been the majority of the cases. I don't think we've really ever declined implementing support for the different meters that are out there. So yeah, in any case, long story short, the idea of what I've been building is their own in-house version of that software for controlling the meters. So a command comes in from the switching services saying, hey, meter 3520815. It's actually a real number. I'm reading it off the meter next to me. I've got a bunch of them in my room. I'll actually bring one to the camera now in a moment. But so that'll come in, and I don't care about the billing or anything like that. I just know, hey, commands come in for this meter. Look it up in the database and do all the fancy shenanigans in the background, and then basically execute that command on the meter. And it works for a bunch of different meters, and none of that has to be exposed to the user. It just works. It's kind of like, when you do like driver design, it's basically like that actually. You get like keyboard input device, like human interface devices, and you get a mouse, and all of those things are, they expose the same interface. You can receive events from them, you can turn the status LEDs on and off. They all have the same interface, but obviously the underlying implementation is different. So it was really a fun project where there's a lot of that. So like heavy abstractions and like useful abstractions, not like, you get a lot of people that over abstract, especially in Java. It's like
Oh yeah.
it's a,
It's a
abstract,
meme.
yeah, it's a meme, abstract bean factory static shitter, I don't know, factory person, whatever. Like, it's always these long ass names. I'm like, what does this do? It's like, well, if you use the proxy adapter static builder factory, bean adapter, it's always funny names like that, with the completable future promise bean factory, then you could attach that using runtime reflection or something like that. That's like the Java story. Oh, and then right at the end, sorry, class not found. So yeah, like it's useful abstractions, and it's been really fun. It's like building a really nice system. And the nice thing about those abstractions is we have another guy on the team that's doing just the driver stuff. So now I'm like, okay, you can read the docs and see what all the different interfaces are, because these meters obviously support different things. They have, a breaker inside that you can manually turn on and off like a little switch. Some of them have 3, some have 2, and some of them have features, others don't. So all of that is, we have a really good system for basically supporting different meters, and we just need to have one guy implement it, and then you get all of those features, quote unquote, for free. It's like, it's just there. So
Yeah.
it's a really fun project, and I'm lucky to have there's luck involved. I was lucky to have been hired by them or gotten a job offer from them before any other company, and it was just a matter of luck that they had decided that they wanted to do this project. So I'm not saying that if you follow through on like Tristan's coding tips, you'll get a job like this. That's never been my goal. It's just to enjoy programming. But I mean, maybe it helps your chances. Who knows? But sometimes luck is a part of it. But that's just that's how I say, always have hobby projects. Don't rely just on your work to, have your creative output.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I couldn't see myself working in a corporate, because then, like you say, it's already said, you're gonna be some number. You're working on some tiny bit, but you cannot really go in and draft a project like that yourself. Which I also always have been quite fortunate in the past. Like, I always got like hired and approached by people who like, we want to do this project, and then there's like this Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, sounds like easy, famous last words. And then I spend time figuring out and try to wing it somehow while we're actually trying to figure out how to build a ship while we're on sea. So
that's what it feels
like.
like. It really feels like that sometimes. But you know what? I mean, the thing is, if people put trust in you, then you do it. I mean, they wouldn't have hired somebody like you if they didn't think that you could at least try and do it. And it's the same situation with me. It's like, it's good if you have a good working environment with people that are nice to you. That's not a given. You get people that are assholes, but luckily I've had really great, and it's always been a good sort of like, there's never incredibly heavy pressure, but it's like kind of that, like, I don't know how to put it, like that kind sort of pressure where it's like, we need to get this done. It's important. And I don't know, that goes a long way. I don't feel there's stress, but it's like a positive sort of stress. It's like, you need to get something done. Okay, work on it. It's different to like, oh damn, everything hinges on me.
Oh yes.
So sometimes there are moments like that, but if you have a good team, then it's there's always a way to like push it back just 1 more week or 2 more weeks or something like that, and that helps a lot. So, and shout out to all the managers out there. We do actually enjoy what you do. I know there's these memes on LinkedIn. It's like, if you're not the CEO or you're not the programmer, what are you doing? Because I feel like some people, they don't like managers. They're like, what are you being paid for? Money is a finite resource. Like, it shouldn't be going to you. I'm like, dude, you don't know what managers go through. Like I am terrible at like saying no. Whenever I used to be on a bunch of calls, and eventually I just told my manager, I'm like, because he's really good at like speaking them. I won't say speaking them down, but like lowering the expectations. Like that's not
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to happen. And I'm not good at that because the technical answer when they ask, "Can you do that?" is always, "Yeah, I can do that." It would take long, but I could do that. And that's you don't want to give them that like edge. Don't you can't tell them yeah, you're being honest with yourself. Yes, you can, but from the business point of view, that's where the manager comes in. I'm like, so now I have the thing. I'm like, well, I'll have to ask my
No.
manager, which for me is basically no, but it works well. So shout out to the managers. The good ones do actually help, and that's the thing. If you work at a nice company, they'll be good. It's different when you work at a company where they mistreat you and they're just shoving you work all the time. It's
Yes.
one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, I was also lucky on a few projects to have like really good project managers to work with because they kept my back. Like, I was like, usually I'm not really good at managing projects because I can be all over the place. That's why I'm
Yeah.
always like, I need a counterpart who's structured enough and also like having the balls or
Mm-hmm.
ovaries to really like push back and say like,
Yeah,
this is
it
what we
takes a
agreed
lot. I
on.
don't I don't have that, It's a skill you learn. Now I'm learning a little bit. I'm like taking notes. I'm like
Yeah.
saying no, like powerful, powerful thing. Another lesson from Tristan. Know how to say no. That's another one. Really, it's important. Else you
So
swamp yourself with work.
yeah, that's why I was always like in bigger projects where we had like 15 people. I was always like, oh, I need this PM because I cannot be bothered
Mm-hmm.
managing like nitty gritty and some bullshit from the stakeholders. I'm like, let me focus on the real thing I'm good at, like figuring out solutions and making sure that we all in the team can work and have a good time working. But for this, I need someone who can actually entertain like the kids more or less.
And it's not just pushing stuff back. The other thing I've also realized is that sometimes they ask, and this is the thing when you're dealing with, so we obviously deal with a lot of other businesses. So the one thing every business has in their own self-interest, you want to do as little work as possible. That's just natural. The less work you do, the more time you have to do other work. It's kind of
Yeah.
just like that. And one thing that I've noticed, and it's very likely obvious to you, but for me, I mean, this is my first job. It's only been like 4 or 3 years. Is a lot of the time they'll ask for things that they already could derive themselves, like from logs or whatever, but they'll ask for it like we want that. I'm like, if you get somebody that can push back enough, and you're being honest, you're telling like, no, there's a way to do this, but it's going to require some effort on your side. Eventually, if you do it enough, um, they will go ahead and do it because else you'll be swamped with every single request from these people, and the worst thing is that a lot of the time these requests are for things that are actually temporary, and you end up implementing like a feature that is like you're going to trash it in like 2 months, and you've spent time on it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So managers are excellent, honestly. They're good ones are excellent. Let me put it like that. My
Absolutely.
manager is a great one. Yeah. No, you need it. You need it.
But yeah,
So yeah, that's that.
I saw this also like back one project. It was really fast paced, and I basically told like everyone on my team, especially the devs, like don't talk to the others. Talk within our team. But if someone is approaching you, like, oh, can you check this and that? No. Also, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
can you simply add this and that?
It's
No.
never
It has
simply.
to
That's the
go.
thing. It's never simply. They always
Yeah.
say that, but it's not simply add this.
Because I remember at some point I introduced like a kind of like a status report or by end of day report where I was asking like, yeah, give me like 3 bullet points what you have been working, because we had the dailies going every morning, and people started like, yeah, yesterday I was working on this and that, and yesterday I also talked to this person, and yesterday I'm like, the daily is supposed to be 15 minutes, and it's about to be this day, today, not
Yeah, the daily's
yesterday.
gone to a day. Yeah.
So I was introducing that, and at some point I discovered like one of the devs, he was like having like 17 bullet points what he was doing. I was like, where did you get those tasks from? Because if I look at, we were using Trello, because you are supposed to work on those two features, but those 17 bullet points, they have barely anything to do with those two features.
Mm.
I got approached by this and that, and I thought like I quickly check. I'm like, No, I know we all want to help people, but this is not how
Mm-mm.
it works because we are not progressing with the actual important stuff.
Yeah.
And
No, it stalls you. If you get spread too thin, you actually don't make progress on anything.
yeah, and this
It's
in
not just
turn
that you
is
slow down, you just don't get anything done. Yeah.
right. So yeah, this was such an incredible learning. Like also seeing like from the management layer, like oh, we need to be more careful and more supportive and make sure that actually the team is working like a well-oiled machine and not like
Mm-mm.
I don't know a bunch of minions doing whatever they like or what they come across.
Yeah, no, that, well, I will say one thing. I was a little bit of that minion, a while back when this project begun because it's the way we work on it. It is a new project, so it doesn't have it has to interface very little with the existing stuff. It runs as its own application, all of that sort of thing. It's like kind of siloed off to the side. And I've been working like a little minion on my own sort of things. Obviously, get stuff from them, but it has been. I always say it's like Tristan's little den of anarchy because it's like he just does his own stuff over here and just running around, but it's all contained. It doesn't spread anywhere else. The other side of the business is unaffected. But now that I've got another guy on my team, it's a little bit more structured. And now we do code reviews with one another, so it's actually quite nice. It actually offloads stuff from me. And it's a great way to also, the code reviews is also a great thing because it gives them exposure to the code base. Like we've ran through it before, like here and there, but the best way really is you never know where to start. Like you're not just going to hop on a Google Meet and be like, today we're reviewing the entire code base. Just rather give them something now and then and you start to learn it. So, if I then die in a bus crash or something like that, somebody can maintain the code. That whole
Yeah.
thing about a bus factor. If your project has a
Mhm.
bus factor of 1, then the guy that gets
You're
killed, then
doomed.
it's dead, bro. You like, I don't know, maybe AI can help you. I don't use that personally, but it probably could help you. That might be the saving grace actually, for those scenarios. But I mean, really, if your project is going on like that for too long, then there's a problem. But thankfully, that's not the case. I've gotten him involved, and he's got a very good like grip on how stuff works, and he's also just a clever fella, a smart fella. So he grabs the concepts well. But yeah, no, the management layer. I like how you call it that, very OSI of you. Um, I was like thinking of a management layer. I'm like, I'm talking about switches now. Has he like lost his like, what is he going on? Oh, management, middle management layer. Yes, yes, the 2.5 layer. Um, yeah, no, it's important. It's I'm not gonna. I used to have this meme like, oh, if you're not a programmer, like get out. And I didn't bring that to this company when I joined them. But like back in university, I'm like, it's like that like hardcore. Oh, I grind code every day sort of like mentality. It's like, you don't need a CEO. You just need 5 developers sort of thing. It's like, yeah, that's not gonna work, bro. I mean, if you want to have
Yeah, I
like a
know.
tiny company, but it doesn't work, dude. Like,
Even then, someone needs to talk to other people. It's gonna be
yeah,
a
dude,
salesperson.
answering emails is a job in and of itself, my man. Like,
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I saw
yeah, no,
we're reaching the 2 hours mark.
almost. Yeah, we've got 3 more minutes left. Do you guys normally go for 2 hours fully, or is there max 2 hours?
Usually we are actually. I think Will is quite quick. He's doing less, but I'm usually like the 2 hours guy. And at some point, I can feel it. That I need to take a break actually, but I could go on for hours.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I could see, yeah, I could see it clearly. But the thing is, you can only put up so much of me. There's like you can only have so much Tristan every day. It's like, or else we would talk for hours. I mean, literally, if I think of the things that I was gonna talk about today, it's like this much. There's so much more that I could actually talk about,
Yeah,
especially just the stuff
same.
that we've done together. I mean, just like off the top of my head, CRXN, if you remember that, that's an
Oh
oldie.
yeah,
That's an old one. That's some like really
good
like
times.
nostalgia over there. Good times. You even had a blog post on it. I remember that. That was quite cool.
I have with the
Yeah,
bridging.
a
Yeah,
while back.
yeah.
Yeah. There was a bunch of stuff on that. We messed around with Babel, if you remember that. That was quite cool. There was something else that we did as well. I can't remember. Oh, you once gave me actually access to like Firefang over like a fast D tunnel, and I was actually able to connect to like some Firefang community
Ooh,
in
true, true,
Nuremberg or something
true.
like that, and that was quite cool. Like that was really awesome actually. I was like, damn, I feel like Freifunk über alles. Like I was almost about to start speaking German, and I was like, oh wait, I'm in South Africa. I'm just remoted in. But it was cool because it's like you can kind of feel what it's like. Like we're like starved of that sort of stuff here in South Africa. Like there's really not a lot of projects that do that stuff. There's some in rural, like more poorer communities. There's actually one where they used Batman Advanced to do like a VoIP sort of solution where people living in shacks can call each other. So cool stuff like that. So there is research that's been done into it, but we don't have like, at least we don't have any more really like good projects like that. And I think we had one in Cape Town, but it was like OSPF based with, and like using just Router OS. But it kind of died out because, and this, I don't know, this might be true with Freifunk, but the majority of the people that join these projects do it because like free internet, and at least in Cape Town where they had a big project there, like there's always your core community, but then most of the people when they got fiber, they're like, I don't need it anymore, because they would actually game and do gaming sessions and do like team speak and stuff over it. But as soon as people found something easier, it's like most of the people that were involved in it were, if something better comes up, they don't care that it's some cool decentralized network. They don't care about that. It's like, so you guys have some cool stuff over there, so I miss that. I wish I had that, but I guess maybe I've got to be the guy to start it, I've got to be the inspiration. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but somehow.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Let's wrap it up for today, and we can continue another day because, like you said, there's like we discussed this
tiny portion, yes, yeah.
And then we can go crazy on another topic because I definitely want to go dive in more into the open source projects at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a good. Both you and I have quite a lot that we could go on over there for a good number of hours. So I think that would be a good thing to look at next. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. And let's call it a day. And I'm going to stop the recording here.